At my wedding reception, I was adjusting my veil using the reflection of a copper backsplash I had spent 3 months restoring by hand. The surface was polished to a mirror shine, which is the only reason I noticed her. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was standing directly behind me. She did not catch my eyes reflected in the metal. She only noticed my drink resting on the bar. I watched as she pulled a small glass vial from her clutch and let 3 clear drops fall into my champagne. I did not turn around. I did not shout. I waited until she walked away to greet a senator's wife. Then, with calm, precise movements, I reached out and quietly switched our glasses. Her poison was now in her hand, and the real tension of the wedding was about to surface. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who is part of this community. Most brides would be hiding in the bathroom, panicking after seeing their new mother-in-law attempt to drug them. But I am a restoration architect. My work revolves around unstable foundations and structural failures. Panic is not something I can afford. What I felt in that moment was not fear, it was static load, the engineering term for the heavy, silent pressure a beam carries just before it either holds firm or breaks completely. I walked back to the head table, my heels striking a steady beat against the hardwood floor. I checked my pulse, 80 beats per minute, higher than normal but controlled. I smoothed the silk of my dress and sat beside Ethan, the man who saves children's lives as a pediatric surgeon, yet could not see that his own mother was a toxin. He squeezed my hand beneath the table, his thumb brushing my ring. He looked at me with so much affection it almost hurt. He whispered that I looked beautiful. He had no idea that 10 feet away, his mother was calmly drinking the champagne she had intended to ruin me with. I looked across the table. Eleanor was seated, entertaining my parents, laughing at something my father said, perfectly performing the role of the generous matriarch. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were cold and empty beneath layers of expensive mascara. She lifted her glass, my glass, in a silent toast. A faint smile followed, as if to say, "Checkmate." She believed she had designed this moment. She believed I was just a fortunate outsider who had wandered into her family legacy, a problem to be solved with money or chemicals. I lifted my water glass. My hand was steady. I took a slow, intentional sip. The water was cold. It tasted like clarity. I watched Eleanor take another drink of champagne. She was completely confident in her cruelty. For the past 2 years, she had tried to push me out, treating me like an intruder in her son's life. She called my work messy. She offered me 6 figures to vanish. What she forgot is that restoration architects know where the weak points are, and we know when a structure is close to failure. I set my glass down, smiled back at her, and waited. To understand why I didn't stop her, why I didn't grab her wrist and call the police immediately, you have to understand the framework of our conflict. This was not a sudden act driven by emotion. This was the demolition phase of a plan Eleanor had been overseeing for 2 years. From the moment Ethan introduced us, I was a zoning violation in her carefully managed world. The sterlings are what people call old money, which often just means inherited wealth and a deep fear of anyone who actually works for a living. I first met Eleanor during an estate inspection. I was wearing work boots and a hard hat covered in drywall dust. She looked at my hands as if they were infectious. She asked Ethan, right in front of me, whether he was hiring help for renovations. When he said I was his girlfriend, she didn't smile. She simply said, "Oh." Her insults were never loud. They were structural, small, deliberate cracks meant to weaken me over time. She would forget to include me in family dinners. She introduced me to friends as Ethan's little project manager, ignoring my master's degree and professional license. The real failure point came 6 months earlier.
I was sitting in her library when she slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the mahogany desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000. She called it a severance package. She said, "You're a nice girl, Olivia, but let's be honest. You're new money. You build things. We own things. You'll never be comfortable at this table, and I'm only trying to spare you the embarrassment." I looked at the check. It was more than my parents earned in 2 years. Then I looked at her. I didn't rip it up. I didn't throw it back at her. I simply slid it across the desk and said, "I think you're underestimating the cost of labor, Eleanor. I'm not for sale." That was when her expression shifted. That was the moment I stopped being an inconvenience and became a threat. And threats, in her mind, had to be eliminated.
In psychology, there is a concept called an extinction burst. I came across it while studying how stress impacts building materials, but it applies just as well to narcissistic behavior. When a toddler realizes that screaming no longer works, they don't calm down. They scream louder. They lash out. They escalate. Their behavior peaks just before it finally collapses. It is the final, desperate surge of energy meant to force control back into their hands. The week before the wedding marked Eleanor's extinction burst. She realized the bribes had failed, the insults had failed, the wedding was still happening, so she chose total destruction. On Tuesday, she called our florist and tried to cancel the arrangements, claiming the bride had died in a car accident. Thankfully, the florist contacted me first. On Thursday, I found Eleanor in the bridal suite examining my veil. After she left, there was a sharp tear straight through the lace. She said it caught on her ring, but I understand the tensile strength of French lace. It doesn't tear unless someone intends it to. I repaired the veil with gold thread, a restoration technique I often use. I didn't tell Ethan. I knew that if I did, she would twist the story. She would gaslight him, say I was imagining things, claim I was stressed and overreacting. She depended on the idea that her actions were so extreme that no rational person would believe them. So when I saw the vial at the reception, everything made sense. This wasn't random. It wasn't just resentment. This was the final release of her extinction burst. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she chose to destroy its memory. She wanted me ill. She wanted me embarrassed. She wanted to show every high society guest in that room that I was weak, unstable, and unworthy of the sterling name. She wanted chaos. I simply chose to let her suffer the outcome instead. Structural failure is rarely sudden. Before a building collapses, it groans. Rivets snap. Wood cracks. You just have to be quiet enough to notice. The reception hall was loud with applause as Ethan finished his speech. He was charming, humble, and flawless. He sat down, kissed my cheek, and whispered that he was the luckiest man alive. Then the room fell silent. The tap of a spoon against crystal rang out like an alarm.
Eleanor stood. She looked composed in her silver gown. She lifted the champagne flute, the one with the gold rim, the one she had poisoned, high into the air. The room waited. She smiled at the guests, then fixed her eyes on me. It was the smile of a predator. "Marriage," she began, her voice carrying that polished finishing school tone, "is about partnership. It's about knowing who you are and where you come from." A few friends at table 4 laughed softly. "And most importantly, it's about trust, knowing the person beside you truly has your best interests at heart." She held my gaze on the word trust. I didn't look away. I raised my water glass. Eleanor lifted the tainted flute. "To the happy couple," she said. She tilted the glass back. I watched the golden liquid disappear. I watched her swallow. One sip, then another. She finished it. For a moment, nothing happened. She sat down looking satisfied and turned to my father to discuss his golf handicap. 1 minute passed, then 2. I sat perfectly still,
My hands folded in my lap, counting time like a metronome. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the strain became visible. Eleanor stopped speaking mid-sentence. She blinked rapidly, her hand moving to her throat. Her face, usually hidden behind layers of makeup and control, turned a harsh gray. She tried to stand, likely to excuse herself, but gravity intervened. Her knees gave way. She grabbed the tablecloth for support, pulling an expensive floral centerpiece down with her. Then the medication reacted exactly as chemistry predicts. It wasn't subtle, it was violent. Eleanor made a harsh, guttural sound that silenced the string quartet. She vomited across the head table, over the silk runner, the china, and the skirt of her custom gown. The smell spread instantly. The woman who had spent 60 years crafting an image of perfection was now collapsing on the floor in front of 200 members of the city's elite. "Mom!" Ethan shouted, rushing to her side. "Mom!" She looked up at him, eyes unfocused, struggling to breathe. She slurred. "I don't feel—" Then she collapsed into the mess around her. The room descended into chaos, but I stayed seated one moment longer, observing the damage. It was unpleasant, it was tragic, and it was precisely what she had planned for me. In emergencies, most people freeze. As guests screamed and crowded in, I stood and took control. I told the DJ to stop the music. I instructed the coordinator to clear a path for paramedics. Ethan was on the floor beside her, checking vitals, his medical training taking over. He called out observations, pulse, airway, pupils dilated.
The paramedics arrived within 4 minutes and lifted Eleanor onto a stretcher. She was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently. As they raised her, her beaded clutch slipped from her lap and hit the floor. The clasp broke open, its contents scattered across the hardwood. Lipstick, a compact mirror, and a small empty glass vial. Ethan saw it and froze. But that wasn't the real evidence. Beside the vial lay a piece of thick, cream-colored stationery, folded neatly. I picked it up, already knowing what it was. Eleanor's handwriting was unmistakable. Elegant, looping script. I walked to Ethan, who was staring at the vial, his face drained of color. "Ethan," I said quietly, cutting through the noise, "read this." He looked at me, confused, then unfolded the paper. I watched his eyes move across the lines. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. My new daughter-in-law has struggled for years with personal issues. We hoped the stress of the wedding wouldn't cause a relapse, but it appears the alcohol was too much. Please excuse the scene. We will ensure she gets the help she needs." It was a prepared statement, written before the reception. She hadn't only planned to poison me, she had prepared the story of my downfall. She intended to blame my sickness on addiction and disorder. She planned to take the microphone while I was vomiting and destroy my reputation in front of everyone. I watched Ethan change as he read. It is rare to see someone lose a parent while that parent is still alive. The worry left his face. The panic faded. His eyes hardened. He looked at the note, then the vial, then the woman on the stretcher. He finally understood the structure of the trap. He saw that the danger was never hidden. It was the person who had raised him. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't look at me. He turned to the paramedic. "She didn't have a stroke," Ethan said. His voice sounded like metal grinding under pressure. "She had ingested a medication and a sedative. Check her bag for the vial and call the police." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and poor choices. Eleanor was stabilized in a private room. The drugs were flushed from her system, but the legal consequences were only beginning. Police officers waited in the hallway. Officer Cardona, a man who looked like he had witnessed enough family conflicts for several lifetimes, took my statement. I didn't need to be emotional. I needed to be precise. I opened a file on my phone.
While the paramedics were loading Eleanor into the ambulance, I had texted the venue manager. Because I had restored the Sterling estate, I knew exactly where the blind spots were, and I knew the precise angle of the 4K security camera behind the bar. The footage was in my inbox before the ambulance arrived at the hospital. I showed the officer the video. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. Eleanor looks around. She removes the vial. She adds the substance. It was clear, high-definition evidence of a felony. Ethan stepped out of Eleanor's room. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He walked past me, past his father, who was sitting with his head in his hands, and went straight to the officer.
"My mother is awake," Ethan said. His voice was clinical, detached. "She wants to make a statement." "Did she confess?" the officer asked. Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No, she said she did it to protect me. She said Olivia is a gold digger who is destroying the Sterling bloodline. She said I would thank her someday." I watched Ethan closely. This was the critical moment. The line was either going to break or tighten around us. Eleanor had played her final move, the belief that a mother always knows best. She was relying on 30 years of guilt and obligation to make him withdraw the charges. Ethan reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out the cream-colored stationery, the pre-written apology speech. "This is evidence of premeditation," he said, handing it to the officer. "My mother didn't just attempt to harm my wife. She planned to destroy her reputation. She wrote this before the reception began. This shows intent." "Ethan, don't," his father whispered from the chair. "She's your mother." He turned to him. "No," he said, "she's a criminal, and if you pay for her lawyer, you're an accomplice." He turned back to the officer. "I am pressing charges, and I am requesting an immediate restraining order for myself and my wife." I watched him sign the statement. It was the most meaningful gesture of love I had ever witnessed. He didn't just choose me, he removed the part that was destroying us. He cut her off with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. There were no tears, only the sound of a pen against paper, finalizing the separation between a son and a toxic past. It has been 12 months since the wedding. Eleanor is now serving a 24-month sentence for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. Her attorney attempted a diminished capacity defense, but the pre-written note eliminated that argument. You can't claim temporary insanity when you drafted a public explanation days in advance. Ethan and I didn't move into the estate. We bought a fixer-upper on the other side of the city. It has strong bones, but it needs work, just like we did. I'm sitting at our kitchen table repairing a bowl I broke last week. It's a Japanese technique called kintsugi. You don't hide the cracks, you fill them with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The idea is that the object becomes more beautiful because it was broken. The fracture becomes the source of strength. For a long time, I believed a good marriage meant no conflict. I thought it meant smooth surfaces and easy days. Eleanor taught me otherwise. She tried to break us. She searched for weak points and struck them repeatedly, but she misunderstood the materials. When we sat in that hospital waiting room and watched the police lead her away in handcuffs, Ethan and I didn't fall apart. We bonded. The trauma didn't leave a scar. It left a line of gold. We trust each other at a depth many couples never reach because they are never tested. I know without doubt that he will choose me, and he knows I will recognize the dangers he cannot see. I finish the bowl. The gold seams catch the afternoon light, shining brighter than the original ceramic ever did. It is imperfect, it is uneven, and it is unbreakable. If you believe toxic family members don't deserve a seat at your table, like and share this story, and tell me in the comments what's the most petty thing a relative has ever done at a wedding you attended.